About 7 years ago, I was fortunate enough to go to the Philippines, and I never got around to making a video, so I thought I'd make one now. I'll make the video in a way to remember my trip, but also to share with someone who might want to go to that part of the world and just want to find out. I went there with a friend who happened to be Filipino, and that was really useful because obviously he could speak the language. We went to go to speak to a conference, and we flew into Manila, which is obviously the main capital. Now the Philippines has 110 million people. It's comprised of 7,640 islands. So that explains a lot why you see a lot of Filipino boat captains, because there's an awful lot of islands and an awful lot of water. So we flew into Manila, and to continue, I thought it'd be appropriate to share some of the verses that we shared at the conference. I went to go and speak at the conference, but I was not the main star. My friend and another friend were. But the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. Psalm 24:1. And be good environmental stewards for the glory of God. Colossians 3:23. I'm just going to share some stories and some photos, and hope you enjoy it. There's a little newspaper article about our little conference, and they're very big on titles in the Philippines. So you say engineer if you're an engineer. In our country here in Australia, no one really cares, or at least that's how it seems to me. Obviously at the airport, like any other airport, you don't make jokes about bombs. After 9/11, that's a big no-no. We saw this sign. I asked my Filipino friend, what is this Wang Wang zone? And he explained to me that Wang Wang is like, you know, when an ambulance goes wee, 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 wee. And what was happening is that a lot of government officials were trying to jump the queue. And they'd say, oh, I've got to push in because I'm here on official government business. And they're trying to be queue jumpers. So they put the sign up, no Wang Wang zone. So you can't try and use that excuse to jump the queue. This map shows a few of the islands and some of the main cities. Manila's up in the top. Down the bottom is Mindanao, which is basically a Muslim sort of state, or they're trying to separate. I'll talk more about that later. And you'll see in the middle there is Tagbilaran. So we were in Manila, and we were in Tagbilaran, which is where my friend is from. Tagbilaran is the capital of Bohol, which is the island that it's on. And there's quite a few touristy things there, which I'll show later. Manila is a very big city, very, very crowded. The Philippines is a Catholic country. And as you know, Catholic countries in the past didn't really practice contraception, so there's an awful lot of people. It's very, very crowded. And that's demonstrated by the very, very crowded and complicated wiring that I'm showing here. And here's just a bit of the billboards. I thought that was quite interesting. Here's a very nice hotel, and the pool there I thought was really cool. It's obviously within the hotel itself. Pretty fancy. Here's a school bus. Now the Philippines has a very complicated history. I understand it used to be in Muslim territory. Obviously got invaded by the Japanese in World War II. Then the Americans came, and that's why you might have heard General MacArthur, and he famously retreated from the Philippines, and he said, I will be back. And he did come back, but there's a distinct American influence in the Philippines, as you can see by the school bus. You can even hear it in the way that the people talk. There's a distinct American accent. Here is one of our hotel people trying to flag down a cab for us. There's a lot of different sorts of transport in the Philippines. I'll show you later what they call a tricycle or a pedicab. In other countries they call them tuk-tuks. Saw this interesting sign at the airport, and I don't really understand why, but they were trying to separate female and male passengers. So talk about apartheid. This is a daycare centre, very different to how it would be in Australia, but they just don't have the space. We would have a playground and all sorts of things generally. Here's a phone charging station. Now back in 2015 this was a fairly novel idea. It's maybe not so novel now, but anyway, I still think it was quite a nice little feature. And there's our hotel guy finally getting a taxi. This is just a bit of an interesting lantern or something that I saw in the trees. Just very different to what I would see here in Australia. Security guard with a pistol. Now that's not something you see very often. So it does make you wonder how many people are carrying guns. So when we were going to Bohol, you have to fly. It was about $50. Obviously you can't drive. It's, you know, an island. So I took this photo from afar. Thought it was a bit interesting. There's a place there at the airport in Manila where you can drop off your firearm, and when you come back obviously you can pick it up. But it makes you wonder how many people are driving around with pistols and so on. So this shows you Bohol with a blue dot, and that's where we flew to. My friend grew up there and his family was there, so we went to go visit there for a little while, and then we went back to Manila later to go and talk to the conference. As I said, there's an awful lot of islands in the Philippines, and obviously these are just some of them. And Cebu Pacific Air is one of the cheap flights that you can fly on. Now at Tagbilaran, what was very interesting for me is that you get off the tarmac, but the homes were very close to the airport, which I thought was not going to happen in our country. People just wouldn't live that close. That's just too noisy. This is an interesting food that I had. So I'm going to show quite a few different food photos, but it's called Alepe, A-L-E-P-E. It was quite nice. I went to get a haircut, and it was very, very cheap. I can't remember what the exchange rate was back in 2015, but in today's rates, 50 Filipino pesos is $1.38. So a haircut for $1.38 is very, very cheap. They also like to give you a little massage, but you can tell them you don't want that, but that's sort of part of their tradition, obviously for a small extra fee. $200, which would be about another $6. Now someone was washing their hair and there's no basin, so they just asked the person, just lean back, and they just basically put all the water in another bucket. So very primitive, but very cheap. Cigarettes, not that I smoke, but you can see they're very, very cheap. Marlboro, 3 Filipino pesos, which is about 8 cents. 8 cents for a cigarette. In Australia, it's about $1 a cigarette. And the cheapest one there would be about 4 cents a cigarette. Very cheap. Next to Bohol, there's a little island called Panglao. But we went to look at this cave, and it was quite interesting. And there's a bit of history there about the cave, and the entrance to the cave. And this fellow in the white shirt, and that's his wife, he also spoke at the conference. I won't share their names just so they can remain anonymous, and obviously a local Filipino guide. There's just a bit of information about the cave. That's me at the cave going down. Me and my friend and his wife. And that's inside the cave. Very, very clear water. Really, really clear. I couldn't resist the temptation to jump in, so I did. As you can see, you can basically see my legs and probably all the way down to my feet. It's very, very clear. It was a little bit cold, but not too bad. There's a lot of coconuts in the Philippines, being a tropical country, and quite cheap. And the lady here is chopping up the coconuts. Quite a refreshing drink. There's me having a bit of coconut juice. They make a red coconut wine. It's called Bahalina. I didn't try any of that. There's another nice little coconut. It's a bit more fancily presented. There's another time we had a dessert in the coconut, and that was really yummy. It was jelly and ice cream and whatever else inside the coconut. This is called buko juice, B-U-K-O, and you can Google the recipe. But it's basically coconut water, coconut meat, and condensed milk. It's very, very nice. And this is just a snack. What I want to tell you about this is the word pasalubong is basically like a gift that you bring me from your travel. So this was something we got at the airport. I think that's quite a nice tradition, that you actually have a word for a gift that you bring from your travel. The food there is very Western. It's very very broad. Obviously there's street foods, but you can see there's Western foods, as I'm showing here. Got McDonald's in Manila, in the bigger cities. But this is the first time that I had McRice. So you actually have rice at McDonald's. So maybe that's a thing in Asia, but it's certainly not a thing in Australia. And this green drink is like a float. I don't know what flavour it was, but it was one of the yummiest things I've ever had. For the South Africans that are watching, maybe it's a little bit like Sparletta, but it sort of had an apple flavour. Really, really nice, and a bit of ice cream on top. I hope they bring this flavour to our McDonald's in Australia. 7-Eleven ice cream. So I'm just showing you, you've got Western American influences, and you've got, more traditional as well. Now this is a chain that I believe they're going to bring to Australia soon, called Jollibee. And Jollibee is like Red Rooster. It's a chicken chain, and it was very nice too. Once again, rice. This is a sign that I saw at a restaurant that I thought was really cool. It gave you the prices of the meals, but down the bottom, as you can see in the red, it says no sharing and no leftover policy. So they try and really discourage people wasting food. And basically they say you've got to pay for leftovers. So, if you're going to waste our food, well, you're going to pay for it, because we can't really resell it. This is a bit of street food I saw. Now, I'm not sure if it was a dog or a pig. Hopefully it was a pig. I just walked on. Here's a lady roasting some nuts. I've been to Thailand since 2015, actually back in 2019. It reminds me a bit of that, a bit of the street foods. You also have your traditional, nice dining restaurants. As you can see, we're waiting for our meal there. One of the weird things, the Philippines is a very complicated and very different society. They have cockfighting, and that's a bit weird. And I don't know if Jollibee has any connection. You decide. But basically we went to go and have a look at some cockfighting, and it's quite sad, because people are basically betting on roosters fighting, and they actually put a blade on the claw, and it's basically the chickens trying to chop each other's heads off, and very, very violent, and would be totally outlawed in our country. And it's like a boxing ring, and the people were betting money, and it was very loud and very, very, very different. It's probably something I wouldn't go and see again, because I don't want to support that. But this is the world we live in. What amazed me though was the guy taking all the bets. Somehow he seemed to remember. People yelling, I want to raise my bet. Now I can't understand Filipino, I'm just telling you what I was told. People were raising the bet and lowering their bets, and the guy was able to remember all of the people in the crowd. Then he was taking their details and taking their money, and I don't know how he remembers it all. We went to this place called the Chocolate Hills. Now the Bow Hole, like I said, is the island. Tagbilaran is the main city, and the Chocolate Hills are a little bit inland. And they're very, very pretty. And this is a fairly famous part of the Philippines, the Chocolate Hills. As you can see, a lot of little lumps. And there's me. We saw this ship house, which I believe is someone's house. And that's my friend there. And there's a little bit of a moat around, like a bit of water around the boat house. Very interesting house. You can put on your little captain hat, pretend you're the captain of the ship, like I did. Saw a lot of nice little furniture throughout the Philippines, so I'm just showing a few examples of that. Quite a nice little wagon wheel kind of bench. Nice little day bed with nice carved horses. A room full of nice carved furniture. A different bench with wagon wheels, me sitting there. Little shrine to Mary or something, because it's a Catholic country. This fellow is obviously a bit overloaded on his motorbike. It's not something you would get away with in Australia. You would get big fines for that. Getting back to the American influence from World War II, they left a lot of Jeeps behind. Jeeps were obviously from the Second World War, and they modified them and made them taxis, and then in the fullness of time they actually built their own longer wheelbase version. This was my Facebook profile for a while, and my now wife thought I was actually married, but she thought this was my car, and she saw some people in the car. But they have a lot of jeepneys in the Philippines, and the people pile in the back, and they decorate them with chrome, and they have a lot of gospel messages, and as a believer I think that's pretty cool. So this is a nice jeepney, and it says Jesus Christ our Saviour. Here's some more jeepneys in Manila. It says Christ the King and answered prayer. A lot of pride in their jeepneys, the taxi drivers. I think that's another statue of Mary. And these are the pedicabs or the tricycles, or you might know them as a tuk-tuk. And this is now down in Tagbilaran in Bohol. Very different that the people paint verses on the back of these vehicles. It's not something that you see in other countries. So here's another one with another verse. Blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven. And another one, and another one. This one looks a bit newer and a bit more colourful. And I really like the sticker. Be honest, even if others are not. Even if others will not. Even if others cannot. And even on a car, God is good. So the people there are not ashamed to share their faith. Quite a nice thatched roof building. This must be a traditional style, I would say, of building. Here's another little thatched house. And this one, I believe from memory, was the little corner store basically. Or at least I went to one like that, and it had, all sorts of stuff for sale. Soft drink, alcohol, cigarettes and so on. And here's a bamboo boom gate just to stop anything. Not really, but I thought it was quite funny. It's a good idea, but it's not going to stop much. One day we went to Lombok, which is a little bit inland from Tagbilaran city. We went there for a few reasons. one of the things we went to look at was the church that had been devastated by the earthquake that happened on October 15, 2013. Now, we went there in February 2015. This is about a year or so after. And the church was devastated. Now, this photo was off the internet. This church was built in 1734 from coral stone, and it lasted until 2013 due to the earthquake. It's called the San Pedro Apostle Parish Church, or in English, the St. Peter the Apostle Parish Church, but it's just known as the Loboc Church. There was an earlier church there in 1602 that had opened. It was a wooden church, but it burnt down. It was devastating to see a church of such age look like this. And here is us outside the ruins of the church. And me and my friend outside the front of the church. The church has since been rebuilt and was reopened in May 2021, so that's really cool. Now, just to the right of this photo, you'll see a bit of a highway overpass. But before I talk more about that, you'll see my friend there is wearing a shirt about the earthquake relief, where they were trying to get funds in to rebuild things like the church and other buildings that were damaged. And here is a photo of how the church used to look and how it looks after the earthquake. But like I say, there's a happy ending. It has since been rebuilt and was finished last year, 2021. Now, this highway overpass is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. I alluded to it before. It is opposite the Loboc Church. And there's quite a nice jeepney there, by the way. My friend explained to me that the people who built this were basically corrupt. They somehow managed the government to spend some money. And then they said, oh yeah, there's a church, a really old church across the road. We've got to stop now. So you have this basically highway overpass that's useless. Crazy stuff happens in some countries. Here is a nice tree that I saw at I think a restaurant. And what I liked about it is that it grew to the second level. Here's the second level. And I really like the fact that they didn't destroy the tree, that they built the building around it. We went to Loboc. One of the other things we saw there was the man-made forest. And I believe it was planted by students. And that was very, very nice. It's really matured now. There's me and the forest, and a bit more of the forest. Another thing we went to see in Loboc was the Tarsier. Now, the Tarsier is a primate. And if you're from South Africa, it looks a bit like a nachtopie. If you're from Australia, it looks a little bit like a possum. Quite an interesting animal. Very, very small. Here you can see that there's a bit of information. You can read that at your own leisure. They have really big eyes. They're really cute, and they're very, very small. They try and sleep in the daytime, so we were told to be very, very quiet. And we tried to do that. And in this photo you can see how big their eyes are. And that's quite a nice shot of the Tarsier there. And there's a bit of a closer zoomed up image. They're very cute. And here's a skeleton of one of the Tarsiers, and my fingers, just to show you the scale. They're very small. And somebody decided to make a collage of a baby Yoda and a Tarsier. There was a really cheap coffee machine there, only instant, but I like my coffee. I think it works out about 13 cents. And you're not going to get a coffee for 13 cents in Australia, I can guarantee you that. Philippines is a country of contrast. There's a lot of poor people. When you have 110 million people, it's inevitable you're going to have a lot of poor people. And this is a very sad story that I found in the newspaper. It's not something that you're going to hear about in the richer countries in the world, where people are maybe scavenging for a few cans to try and get some money and then drowning in a stupid drain. Really sad. An estimated 12.4 million Filipinos, that's in 2015, were jobless. So it's a country of contrasts. And obviously there's some nasty things that happen there too. And this is a view from our hotel, looking across to Manila. There's a bit of smog in that photo. This must have been another day, it's a bit clearer. So it's a very interesting country of contrasts, of poor people and rich people and development and basic buildings all together. Here's another photo on a bit more smoggy day. And this is the richer side. There's a mall and there's a place called Dad's. Now I don't know who's Dad, but there's a restaurant there, a really nice restaurant. I'm going to put some links in the description box below. Some of the waiters come and sing for you. Well, they're not waiters, but they're buskers, and they're really, really good. I first saw them singing for someone. I thought, wow, they must be someone famous and special. And then my friend explained to me, no, they can come sing for you and you just give them a bit of a tip. And so we arranged for that, and so they sang some nice numbers for us. Very nice restaurant. It had basically a Chinese buffet, Filipino buffet, and a Western American style buffet, all in one big restaurant. If you're in Manila, go to the mega mall and try Dad's restaurant. I think this was a nice bathroom that I saw somewhere. I'm just trying to show some of the contrast in the country. That's the front of the Dad's Mega Mall restaurant. In the South Island of Mindanao in the Philippines, the people there are trying to separate and become a separate country. And just before I went there, there was a big military operation. But the police chief organised something of his own accord, and he didn't talk to the army commander or the Air Force commander, and about 30 soldiers were assassinated basically. So I suggest you stay away from Mindanao. You might get taken hostage. Quite a few doggos in the Philippines, and this was at a little resort. I think he was hoping for some free food. It's not something that we see in Australia, all the stray dogs. There's another hopeful customer hoping for some free food. These dogs have the idea. They're suntanning at a nice little beach. Some of their safety standards are a little bit different. You wouldn't get a drain like this in Australia. The people would be too scared that you're going to trip and sue them. But an open drain there, well, seems to be okay. A few more stray dogs on the beach. I took a photo of this road because it was under construction, and I just thought the safety standards once again were a little bit different. There's quite a drop off between the two sides of the road. You could probably do some damage if you come off that road. Once again, safety standards are a little bit different. Obviously this was the extra passenger on the jeepney, and he decided he's just going to hang out on the back. If you try that in our country, you're going to get a big fine from the police. And I think these guys were delivery guys, same sort of thing. Hope they can hold on. More jeepney customers hanging off the back. So at the bottom of Bohol Island, you have a smaller island called Panglao. And I'm going to talk about Panglao now a little bit. We went to a little resort, and the blue dot shows where it is. And we stayed there. It was really nice. This is some sort of traditional raft or something in a nice little beach. Very nice tropical part of the country. Here's a closer zoomed up version of the bamboo raft. Quite different. Nice coconut palms, and someone decided to put a basketball hoop on one of them. So I thought that was quite interesting to have a little basketball court basically at the beach under the palms. Very, very nice. You might have heard of the song of the lady. She sells seashells by the seashore. This is what these people were doing. I felt sorry for them and I supported them by buying some seashells. So when you have a country of 110 million, sometimes hard to make a living. So all in all, it's a very, very interesting country, a land of contrasts, a land of a lot of people, a land of cheap beer and food and cigarettes, very relaxed and friendly people. I would recommend you can go to the Philippines. If you get the chance, you should go. Particularly if you can get out of the big city and go down to the islands. Anyway, the conference went well and we really enjoyed it, and I hope to get back to the Philippines. Hope you enjoyed my video.